Shout out to our sponsors, Will Nicholson, Tomlinson Sotheby's International Real Estate, Sandpoint, Idaho, Shanghai Jazz, Madison, New Jersey, McCoole's Red Lion Inn, Quakertown, Pennsylvania, beautiful Peddler's Village, Lahaska, Pennsylvania, Norris, McLaughlin, Allentown, Pennsylvania. My name is Eric Mintel. By night, I'm a professional jazz musician, but by even later at night, I investigate the paranormal. I, along with my team at Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, travel the country investigating all things paranormal. This is Bucks County Paranormal Investigations.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Eric Mintel. Welcome to another edition of Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, the interviews. Today, I have got a great guest. I cannot wait to share her story with you. Her name is Morgan Knudsen, and if you haven't heard from her, well, guess what? You're going to know about her today. She is an author. She's a speaker. She's also star of Haunted Hospitals, and she also leads these incredible workshops on how to deal with the paranormal. So, Morgan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, because it's always so much fun, and I'm just glad to finally meet you.
I know. It's nice to, it's like we have to do these Zoom meetings, but one day we'll meet face to face. And but
absolutely,
seeing your presence on Facebook, and you're doing so many great things out there. In these interviews, I always like to ask my guests, like, what was the fire in the belly that really started this? But before I do that, you're coming to us today from Alberta, Canada, right?
Yeah. Cold Alberta today.
How much snow do you have up there today?
Not as much as you guys are about to get.
I know.
Yeah.
Where are you buried?
Yeah, no, we're right now we're not too bad snow wise, but we came out of a really nasty cold spell, and then it warmed up. We were like in the pluses for quite a while, and we've got like a few days of terrible, and then
I know.
There's like good, and then there's terrible, and that's the weather.
There's
the
no
weather, yeah. There's just no middle.
No in between. Oh my God. Well, it's great to have you here. And like I always say, like, what was that catalyst that really got you involved in the paranormal and wanted to make that your career?
Oh gosh. So when I was really young, I had experiences when I was a kid. Like I think most of us do. We have something that we can't explain that happens to us. But I was also really blessed, I think, to grow up with the investigators of parapsychology at the time, who, there was no ghost hunters shows and like this kind of crazy media driven like lunacy that's kind of taken over, right? And we didn't have that. We had investigators like Lloyd Auerbach and Carrie Gaynor and Dr. Barry Taff, and we had all of these faces of science. And so for me, when I had these experiences, and then when I went to look for information, the information there was very quality, and that really took my breath away when I was a kid, because we're taught all our lives this stuff shouldn't happen. This is not real. And then it's like, well, no, hold on a minute. There's some of the best universities in the world, the best programs in the world that are studying this. And so that was really it for me. There was a deep calling there. And then 6 years into my career, after forming Entity Seeker Research and Teachings, I found out my great-great-grandfather had roots in the paranormal and whatnot, and was the president of the first Parapsychology Association in Canada.
Wow.
So yeah, but that didn't happen till later. So it was sort of a long twisted story, but at the end of the day, I think there's a calling there. There's an instinct that I followed.
So yeah, I mean, and that's incredible. So he was one of the first ones to really start that paranormal investigation, so to speak. In how long ago was that again? That was in the 1900s.
This was 1900s. So this would have been early 1900s. Wow, and he followed in the footsteps of a fellow by the name of Dr. Sumter King. And so there's a number of people here in Canada, but he really brought this to the forefront because he published 2 very, very strong books on it. And he was a very notable physician in Ontario. He was very famous, and he really put a lot on the line to put those books out.
Wow. So, I mean, so you have like a history of that so that must have made you feel like, wow, so, and I always say too, like whatever environment, was your environment growing up, was it like paranormal? Did you have like you've had experiences, obviously. So were they, was that also a catalyst to say, oh, there's something more deeper here than was?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, you can hear about stories until the ends of the earth, but until
Right.
it's in your hands, it's very difficult to make your own. So I think the experiences definitely had a role to play, but I found myself very early on differentiating from the feeling of fear and curiosity. And when I was a kid, I was always very, something might have scared me, but then curiosity was the next step for me.
Mhm.
And I think that's what it was with this as well, where it was like, oh my God, this was terrifying in the moment. And then looking back, my brain started to go, okay, well, like there's something more to this. Like, what is this? And then so that curiosity took over.
Looking for a vacation home? Look no further. Will Nicholson of Tomlinson Sotheby's has just what you're looking for. World-class entertainment at Schweitzer Mountain or water sports at Lake Pend Oreille, Idaho has it all. Fresh powder skiing, live music, multiple restaurants, and downhill biking in the summer. And, if you're lucky enough, you might spot Bigfoot. He loves it here. Give Will a call today.
And so you've written some books. Well, you've written a book right now called Teaching the Living.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. What is that about? Now, what's I know we're jumping all around here, but we'll get the paranormal.
It'll all come back. It'll all come back.
It'll all come back.
Yeah. So teaching the living, I wrote because it's funny because I released it a number of years back and whatnot, and then Beyond the Fray Publishing came and said we really want to do a second edition, and then a book after that. So I was really happy to do the second edition because the information, of course, has become so much more vast in the world of parapsychology, and there's been so many more advances. So I was happy to throw a second edition out. But the book in and of itself, I really wanted to get past the sort of the ghost hunter media hype and put forward the research, not only that I've done, but also the greats in parapsychology that have put forward as well. And to tie in the fact that our state of being, our emotions, how we present ourselves in the world is indicative of the paranormal activity that we receive. And so much of the time we tend to think that this stuff is asserted on us, and it's not. And it's one of those things where we have such an intricate role in interacting with these energies. We are part of that energy. Mm-hmm. And how then do we manage our own factors, our own way of being with the non-physical energy around us? And it's not just something that is, oh, this is all terrifying. I really wanted to convey to people that this connection that we have with all that is something that is so positive, and the root of paranormal and parapsychology is connecting with the deeper part of who we are and the larger part of who we are. And when we can do that, then all of this stuff starts to make a lot more sense. So that was the goal.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of people think it's outwardly, projected, but sometimes it's inwardly. And I've always said that whoever is experiencing a haunting, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but who is ever experiencing a haunting, they're connected somehow to that particular place or maybe that particular entity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's always a connection, and we don't get things by accident. I'm a firm believer there are no accidents, and there are no coincidences. And our ability to project into this world and perceive things on the basis of the stories that we tell ourselves and the emotions and the state of being that we attract from. Mm-hmm. And it really plays such a key role in people's ability to get a handle on things when things aren't going the way they want it to go, when things are frightening. How do you connect back in with yourself in order to manage what is manifesting around you? And it is so unbelievably key to just moving through the world, not only about the paranormal, but about life.
I think too, with, a lot of the people that are, quote unquote reincarnated, you've got these kids that are like experiencing like somebody from World War I, that and then all of a sudden, there's people that have like the intense collection for Civil War, memorabilia. And I know a few people like that. And it's just something that they're, we always say they're an old soul. But again, maybe it's something like, maybe it could be that. Maybe they're coming at it from another direction.
Well, and reincarnation is so interesting because it is really becoming more and more of the root studies of the survival hypothesis in parapsychology, because now they're beginning to really take a look at, there's a well-known researcher by the name of Dr. Ian Stevenson, and his work goes way, way, way back in terms of understanding reincarnation and these past lives and these different experiences, that especially in children, because children don't have that bias, right? I remember hearing this story, and this always caught me, and because it was so phenomenal. It was this little I think it was a little boy, and his parents would go down a walk every evening down this one street, and he was obsessed with this house. He was a little kid, and he kept going up to the door, and they said, don't bother the strangers in the house, right? Don't bother the strangers. And anyway, but one day, finally, they knocked on the door because they said, we are so sorry, but our little boy, he is just absolutely, he keeps saying this is home, this is, Wow. So they opened the door, and the couple, they said, no, that's okay. And the little kid bursts through their door, runs into their house and over to this cabinet. And he's opening the door to the cabinet, and he's like, oh no, my toys. And they were like, okay, we are so sorry. Like, our child, right? They're mortified. The parents are mortified. And the couple that owned the house were in tears, and they said, you're never going to believe this, but we lost our child, and a number of years ago, and it was before their little boy was born. And they said, we used to keep his toys in that cabinet.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was of course instant bond for this family, but I think there's such a case to be born for the survival hypothesis because of reincarnation.
Shanghai jazz has been a staple of gourmet cuisine and incredible live jazz for over 20 years. Owner Tom Donahoe has created an atmosphere where good food and good friends can gather for an unforgettable culinary and musical experience. And don't forget to check out the new Encore Lounge downstairs. Choose from a variety of drinks and wait for the show to begin. Shanghai Jazz, your destination for jazz.
So you're thinking that once a person, dies, our spirit could go obviously into an unborn, maybe? Like, are we talking maybe an unborn?
The big question, right? That's the big question. And there's so many unknowns about things like reincarnation and these different studies and whatnot. But I think where it's coming to in the world of parapsychology and science and whatnot and consciousness is that consciousness is not coming from the brain. It is not emergent. It is fundamental. It is universal, and that the brain acts as a translator for said consciousness. And I think the more we lean to that, and the more that those doors are opening in both biology and quantum physics and all of these different areas, that the more this begins to make a little more sense, where it's not necessarily like it's one person's spirit as if it's like a solid mass that's going from one thing to another thing. It's a consciousness that is then being expanded and then translated through the brain. So
that's cool. This is why I love this show, because I always have great guests on who give you another angle to look at, and it's just another, because, that's the thing. A lot of people, and we always say it in our videos too, we leave a lot of these locations with more questions than answers, because I don't think you'll ever get the full answer, because it's infinite. And what you're saying, it's around us, like universally, like air, it's just encapsulating us.
Well, and I don't think we're necessarily going to get it. I don't think we're necessarily capable of really getting it. We're talking about concepts that are so vast and huge that even in the scientific world, they're just bridging the gap little bit by little bit. And in Teaching the Living, I talk about the idea that the science, as their parapsychology kind of makes these leaps of faith, and then science catches up to the leap. But parapsychology is one of those unique sciences where you have to be able to think outside the box and then let the rest catch up. And thankfully, that's what keeps happening. But it might not be overnight. It might be a decade later. It might be 10 years later or 3 years later, or who knows. But it is one of those unique things where you've got to think outside the box and then and then see what happens in the
Yeah.
in the world of this, the scientific realm.
I mean, yeah, and given what the world's been going through, I mean, lately, the last couple of years, I'm sure that's been more prevalent than ever, and
Crazy as hell is what
yeah,
it's called.
yeah. CAH.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
God. Yeah. Well, and people, people can find your book, I'm assuming online and on Amazon. And so folks, go get her book. It's an incredible book, and it's an eye opener. And it'll give you just another way of thinking about a lot of these crazy things that we're experiencing and that you may be experiencing yourself. Being out in the field, you're out in the field. What is some of the craziest things that you've experienced?
Oh my gosh.
That you could talk about.
Oh yeah. Well, there's been so many I've been doing this for 20 years, and there's been some crazy things that have gone on over the years, both, but really joyful and some that are just bizarre and weird. I think probably the weirdest is a case that I've been in and out of for about the last 5 years, and it's been wild because not only does it have Dogman involved, which you're very familiar with,
Oh, yeah.
but there's been overtones of potential homicide. There's been hauntings on an anomalous phenomena on the property that it just don't make any sense. We've got infrasound contamination on the site, which of course leads to the dizziness and the vertigo and people seeing things out of the corner of their eye and this kind of thing. So that one has probably been one of the weirdest, but we've nicknamed our dog man out there Snoopy, because he likes to sit on the roof of the shop on this property.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he's been seen about 3 or 4 times now in total, and he's absolutely fascinating. He's never hurt anybody. He's very calm and kosher, but he I don't know, like there's been something I think very endearing for everybody on the case about him, because he's quite shy. If he is seen, he just runs. But it's been really cool, and he was my first encounter with something like that. I've never ever had to deal with that, and it's been a journey and a gift at this all in the same time.
Has anyone got any video or any photos of him?
We've got trail cams up throughout the property, and like so many of the Dogman encounters, the trail cams fire and there's nothing there, right? So yeah. So we're still back at that stage. He's really tricky to catch, but when he's there, when you're getting watched. It feels like there's a predator in the bush, and that you got to be careful. I know the feeling you've mentioned before.
Yeah, I just had mentioned that our team with Dominic Sattel and Ellen Collins and I and Lee Hample over at Lee's Farm in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. I mean, we were out there that night, and it was we had a trifecta of paranormal activity. But some of the pictures that Lee's got, and I'm sure you've seen some of those. I mean, you see the mist, and it's in one frame, and it's actually Lee is in a picture, and it's covered him a little bit. The mist has, and then the next second it's gone. But he has a picture which is just crazy, where he has a roadkill deer. This is something new now. Roadkill deer that's there. The mist comes over. 30 seconds later, the deer's gone, and so's the mist.
Judith A. Harris, attorney, partner, and chair of the Estate Trust and Tax Group of the law firm of Norris, McLaughlin, with offices in Allentown, PA, Bridgewater, New Jersey, and New York City. Norris McLaughlin is a full-service law firm handling matters ranging from estates, trust and tax business law, litigation, real estate, intellectual property, healthcare law, municipal law, and immigration law, just to name a few. Norris McLaughlin.
Mist comes over. 30 seconds later, the deer's gone, and so's the mist in the next picture. Yeah, so we have no idea what's going on. We always say, what do you think about this? Because we always talk about, like, the portal situation. We're in like there's some kind of energies, and we know there's portals all over the world. Could this be like another Skinwalker Ranch kind of thing? What is your feeling about things like that? And I'm sure you've experienced that too.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Skinwalker Ranch because the property that I'm talking about is very, very parallel with the stuff that goes on there, where you get the very strange electromagnetic spikes, which don't have any basis and disappear and reappear, and like just very, very odd. So very, very similar properties. But, I think it is so indicative of the fact that our world is so unknown to us on levels that we really don't understand. And whenever you get something like this, like dogmen or whatever, I really start to look at the concept of thought forms, because here we've got these creatures that I don't think are biological, because we catch them in these different forms, these myths, these when you look at the biology line, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Dogs and man and there's too much of a gap, so it doesn't make sense. But I question whether or not there is something to the idea of these things being some sort of a thought form that is manifested to the point where it can interact physically. And we saw an example of this out of Ontario in what they call the Philip experiment, where enough focus was given to basically something that they created themselves. It was a character they made up by the name of Philip. And Philip became a manifestational reality, where it began to actually physically move objects and be able to touch things and respond, and you could interact with it like it was an actual entity. But it was actually, it's the coolest thing. It was an experiment done by the Society of Psychical Research and Mensa, and they were able to replicate it again with another character they created called Lilith. And with stuff like Dogman, I kind of wonder if we lean into that a little bit, because as much as we see it pick up food or pick up roadkill or whatever, we don't know if it eats. We don't know if it's physically doing what we think it's doing. It's doing some sort of physical mimicry of eating,
dematerializing or something.
And you've got them all the way back through history, because dogmen are kind of in the same boat as things like the Wendigo, where you look at where they came from and it's endless. Like you can't really put a pin in where it started.
Ellen, when we were on the property that night, she a few nights later had a dream that when we were in and we could see ourselves on the video and where this happened, she said we froze in this one part of the video. And she said she saw the dogman right in front of her, and it put its claw in her palm. And when it did that, she could see exactly why this thing was there and what they were doing there, trying to procreate the species and all kinds of really interesting things. Then come to find out later, Lee has been having the same kind of dreams.
Very interesting.
Really interesting. It goes back to like the Betty and Barney Hill experience, where they both had those dreams. They didn't know they were having the same dream until one day they came together and said, wait a minute, that's the same dream I'm having. So there is something to that, I think. Let me ask you this. When you go into a location, are you sensitive? Are you as sensitive to that fact? Can you feel what had gone on there?
In the heart of beautiful Bucks County, you'll find Peddler's Village, a village of shopping and dining, a village of family fun, a village of elegance. Visit Peddler's Village today and make memories that last forever.
It's so funny. I used to say no. I used to say no because I really didn't think that I never worked on anything like that ability. I know a couple of people here that are unbelievable mediums. And I mean, I couldn't even hold a candle to these people. But it's funny because over the last number of years, the more I'm a big practitioner of meditation and things like that, and I found that stuff sort of comes to me not necessarily in haunted locations, but information and information that I'm needing or needing a preview of, like almost like a little bit of precognition is there. It's there. And it's been an interesting experiment for me over the last little while because I have this intuition and this information come in, and it's been going on for a very long time. And I think I've always just shoved it aside a little bit, thinking, okay, well, yeah, like I'm putting the pieces together or whatever. But over the last little while, I've come to realize like, no, there's more to it. And I need to, pay attention.
And kind of, yeah, right. And tune into it, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And I know my buddy Dominic, who's also a medium, and I've known Dominic since high school. But when we were out of the farm that night, he's like, "What did you get me into, Mintel?" Because this is completely out of his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And it was just something that he never really ever experienced before. And it really shook him up because, both of us are like, we like to try to go onto these investigations and look, if there's something there, let's investigate it. Let's go for it. But like I said to you earlier, I said, we got to that situation where we felt like these things were behind us and it was coming toward us, and we hear this rustling and we're not protected. I think it's time to go, and it's almost like it was telling us to leave. That was the other thing that was really prevalent, to say, get out of here.
So I do a lot of teaching with fire, and because I'm a fire
artist. I was
artist.
going to ask you about, yeah.
Yeah, and I do a lot of teaching with fire for a number of different reasons. But one of the things that I'm always telling people with that is, there is never a time in which I light a torch or I'm doing fire breathing or anything like that where I'm not absolutely conscious that fire has potential to do me in.
Oh yeah,
100%. Like, as much as I know what I'm doing, and I do, you've got this living, breathing entity that is going to do its own thing, and you're partnering with that thing to have an experience. But you have to keep in mind that it's doing its own thing. It's going to.
How did you get into what brought you to that?
It's like some mishmash, hey? So ridiculous. So
I think I liken it to like walking on coals. How people are walking on coals, and it's like a confidence, like they're trying to get that willpower. So is it a similar type of thing?
For me, it was really about changing people's paradigms, and I think it started with changing my own. I found it a very empowering art form, to be able to manipulate something that you're taught all your life. You don't touch that thing. But the more I worked with it, because it involves so much of things like breath work, being in the moment, being present, being aware, all of the things that you use with parapsychology, and the unknown, that I realized that this was a really great teaching tool for the general public, because it's something that everybody has a paradigm about. We've all been taught, don't touch fire, fire's hot, fire's bad, don't do that thing. And and it's sort of the same thing with the paranormal, where it's like, that's evil, that's horrible, that's bad, it's all negative, which is completely wrong. Right. And I'm like, okay, if I can get people in my audience to look at fire differently and see that there is a loophole, because everything I do with fire is science-based. There's no magic tricks. When I touch it, when I manipulate it, all of that has to do with the fuels, the thermodynamics, all of that. There's nothing on my hands. And when they realize that there's a loophole there, then they can start to get their heads around, well, maybe what I'm taught about the paranormal, maybe that's
right. Makes more sense. Yeah, it would make more sense. Yeah. So that's how I started to use it. Yeah, that's how I started to use it. And it's worked really, really well. But there's lots in the works otherwise. I mean, we just finished shooting the 4th season of Haunted Hospitals. So it should be out sometime this year. Cool. And I've got a second book that's going to be out in the next number of months called The Gift of Instinct. And so that's going to be coming out as well. So yeah, so there's always stuff in the there's always stuff in the mix. And then my podcast as well, Supernatural Circumstances. We've got great.
Yeah, we've got some stuff coming up on that that's pretty cool, and it's doing exceptionally well also. So
that's awesome. Well, we'll make sure that people have links and stuff that they can go and definitely check out her show and the books. And we'll make sure that everybody has that on there. We have definitely got to do this again for sure.
We absolutely will. And it's like you say, eventually in person as well.
Definitely.
Make that work.
Definitely. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here today, and give everybody all the information on where they could find you. Awesome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on another eye-opening interview on Bucks County Paranormal Investigations. Have a great night.